This episode of the School Zone podcast is brought to you by School Spirit Vending, hassle-free year-round fundraising for your school. At School Spirit Vending, we do all the work. You cash the check.
Welcome to the School Zone podcast, your source for the most creative and innovative ways to school fundraise and impact your kids. Now, here's your host, Matt Miller.
Hello, School Zone podcast listeners. Matt Miller coming to you from Stephenville, Texas. And I'm very excited today to have Mr. John Howe on from the northern Colorado area, actually outside of Fort Collins, Colorado. John is a full-time graduate student at Colorado State University in Education Sciences, STEM Education Emphasis, graduate teaching assistant, and founder and director of the STEM Summer Institutes. In fact, if I'm correct, John, you're in the middle of one of those right now.
We are. We've got about, probably about 700 students at 3 sites here in Fort Collins that are really having a great day of learning about science, technology, engineering, and math.
So, talk a little bit about STEM. How did you get involved in it? What specifically do you do with the Summer Institutes?
Kind of my coming to STEM started out back in the 90s when I listened to an author present about his view of what was happening in U.S. education. His name was Hetrick Smith. He's written several books, but the book that influenced me, and I quit going to the conference and just read the book and kind of engaged that, which formed my thinking about that school has to be meaningful and it has to lead towards something. And a lot of what we were doing at the time, and this is back in the early 90s, late 80s, was not justifiable. We can't justify what we were doing. He did case studies of a student in Toyota City, Japan, a student in Stuttgart, Germany, and a high school student in St. Louis, Missouri. All families, blue-collar auto workers, and he talked about their differing educational experiences. The kid in Germany was an apprentice working at BMW, learning how to operate robots, so that when he finished high school, he would move into a paid position there, continue his apprenticeship, and then become a journeyman in a few years. In Toyota City, the students' teachers worked to provide jobs for them with Toyota when they finished, so that they could have a good paying, secure job working in industry when they left. And then in St. Louis, Missouri, the young man wanted to be a police officer. He was taking one class as in his senior year, and the rest of the time he was working at Dairy Queen in a work study. There's no relationship between his work study and what he wanted to do as a profession. And school is truly irrelevant to that young man, and it kind of shocked me into action, that we really just can't do business that way. Kids' lives are way too important. The future of our country is way too important to waste school time on meaningless activities like a work study that had absolutely no relationship to what he would do once he graduated from high school. So that kind of set me on a journey, and as I read, what is real clear is that the fastest growing sector, some of the fastest growing and the best paying jobs, so those two things together, are heavily science, engineering, technology, and math type jobs with an emphasis in computer science. So when I came to Fort Collins, we were faced with declining enrollment at our school. It was a brand new school that opened up down the road. And the superintendent said, I know you had 1,000 kids last year and you've got 650 kids this year, and kind of challenged us to come up with a solution. And so kind of at at that call to action, the then new head principal and I put our heads together and looked at what we had in terms of resources in our community and decided to make Preston a neighborhood school open to all kids of science, technology, engineering, and math. And that's kind of how we came to this. The summer program grew out of my experience teaching in a summer program for about 25 years up in Wyoming. And I said, I think we can do that in Fort Collins. We started with 76 kids 8 years ago, and we have about 760 kids this year. So we've grown by a factor of 10. And that's just the summer program. We do a lot of other things, but that's the summer program. And that's a little bit about my evolution toward STEM.
So, John, why do you think there's such a disconnect between what we're doing here in the States and what this study found, in this case, Japan and Germany? What's the disconnect there? Because it makes total sense to I'm sure anybody that's listening.
Yeah, so that's a complicated answer. It's a complicated question. Why are we not providing a more comprehensive education? Some of it is resistance to change. That our educational system was invented, I guess, for lack of a better word, back in the 1890s. And a committee back in 1890 said, well, if you're going to graduate from high school, you ought to have 4 years of math, 4 years of language arts, 3 years of social studies, 2 or 3 years of math, and science in English, science, math, social studies, English, science for 2 years, something like that. So that model has been handed down from generation to educational generation since 1890. And we've really never looked at that. And we still define graduation by Carnegie units. And honestly, it's not a great current model. We're trying to take the future and stuff it into a mold that was invented 100 years ago.
I guess I'm wondering, like in your situation, was it you then that essentially made the decision to embrace STEM within Prestonwood, or was this a district-wide decision? Is this something that is just being done across the country on a school-by-school basis, or are there actually districts that are embracing this as a whole from the very beginning? How does all that dynamic work?
Well, in answer to the first part of that question, it's really Scott and I sitting in this room that I'm in right now saying, let's do it. That's literally what happened, which is kind of part and parcel of innovation, right? You take a chance, and if it works out, great, and sometimes it doesn't work out, but you learn from failure. So I'm going to give you my 2 cents about what I think is happening across the country. There's a couple of dynamics. One is that people read reports put out by the Department of Labor, and they look at salaries. And if you look at the top 20 best paying jobs in the country, 15 of them are STEM jobs. So they're doctors, and they're medical technologists, they're computer programmers, they're engineers of all types. And so many of those jobs, I'm sure 3/4 of them, have a heavy emphasis, if not purely STEM emphasis. So I think people read that and they go, dang, I'd sure love for my kid to be able to compete in that economy, and I'd love for them to have a good income. And so they say, I would love for my kid to be prepared for an engineering education. So I think there's pressure, and I think school people read those reports too, and they say, well, gosh, we better do something. I think that's one dynamic. I think there's an economic dynamic. And I think the other dynamic that's happening is that people are realizing that it's not, STEM is not available for everybody. In Colorado, 7% of STEM degrees go to students with a Hispanic heritage. And that is somewhere about 30% of our population have a Hispanic background. There's something wrong if there's that gap of 20-some% of kids. And my number is about 30% of kids are interested in the STEM areas, maybe a little more than 30%. And that's true for all kids. But somehow the system, our system, as an educational system, deals students of color out. So I think there's a social justice component to the STEM movement as well.
So let's talk a little bit more specifically about, what you have done there. It's been a number of years. You guys have seen some great success. How did the whole institutes get started? What are the kids involved in, over these couple of weeks? And what is the ultimate goal for that when they're done?
Gotcha. So I mentioned that I taught in a program at Casper College for a long time called KEY, which is Knowledge Enrichment for Youth, which is a program for high ability youth in Wyoming. And we got kids from elsewhere, but it was mostly Wyoming. And I taught a aviation class. I taught programming classes and I taught robotics classes. But that eventually evolved into the aviation class because kids really liked it. And it occurred to me about 10 years in, because I'm a slow learner, that fun that I was having with kids, I could have during the school year, number one, and number two, I could start a program where I was here in Colorado, and so that's kind of the background for that.
Now, are there other programs around the country that are being done in the summer as well, or are you guys kind of pioneering in this area?
Well, there are a lot of creative innovators in this country, and it's interesting that creative and innovative people that want to solve a problem often come up with the same kind of solution. And so there are programs all over the country. We think ours is somewhat unique here, but there's a lot of good work being done nationally. Discovery Education even has a free curriculum. They provide training for a week-long or day-long workshops. So there's a lot of people that are trying to fill this need and create opportunities for kids.
That's awesome.
Most teachers and administrators not only want their kids to have developed minds, but opportunities to develop creativity, positive human values, and a sense of personal excellence. But your budget doesn't allow for all of it. You need fundraising. At School Spirit Vending, we are helping a growing number of elementary schools fundraise the easy way, and we do all the work. We provide the sticker vending machine, free customized school logo stickers, licensed and non-licensed stickers like NFL and Disney, as well as tons of other fun stickers that are relevant to kids. The best part? School Spirit Vending is free. No upfront expenses for schools at all. A percentage of machine revenue goes directly to the school, PTA, or PTO each month. And did I say customized stickers? Our skilled graphics team can help custom design your school spirit stickers. You just tell us what you want. The only thing you do is provide us a busy hallway or commons area. Oh, and you'll have to find the time to cash a monthly check. It doesn't get any easier than that. 2,000 elementary schools can't be wrong. To see for yourself how easy year-round, hassle-free fundraising can be, go to schoolspiritVending.com/schoolzone. You've been listening to the School Zone podcast, your source for the most creative and innovative ways to school fundraise and impact your kids. Now, back to Matt.
So what are the kids doing during the 2 weeks, and what's the goal?
Our goal is to really help students catch a vision for what they can do, who they are and what they can do. And I call that STEM confidence and competence. We want them to see that, gosh, I can do some of this, what they perceive as being difficult work. They can solve complicated problems. And we believe that that'll serve them well when they go into high school. And it'll give them some experience, some competence when they get into things like underwater robotics. Let's say they get excited about the class we offer and they want to go deeper. So they end up at Woods Hole Institute and study how do you build and how do you use robots to research underwater environments. I'll give you a quick view of some of the classes. We have a digital music composition, which is truly just music, but it's using the digital tools available to create music. We have a virtual reality class where students are using some of the emerging virtual reality tools like Oculus Rift and Google Cardboard, and we've got some other tools. So they're programming, they're learning coding, they're creating their world, and then they're immersing themselves in the world. We've got a class called Girlcraft. Right now in Colorado, Minecraft, and lots of other places. I've got a friend down in the Dallas area, and she's doing a lot of work with Minecraft, which presents as a game, but what it really is learning. It's a subtle way to teach kids how to program. And so we've got one just for girls, because often girls do better in this area when they're just with other girls. We've got digital expression, so using digital tools to create art. We've got a flight simulator class, girls who code class. We've got a fountain engineering, how to design and build projectors for water fountains, laminar flow water fountains. 3D design. Got a class called the Science of Harry Potter. Got another class about animals called All Talk, No Words, Understanding the Language of Animals. We've got Exploring Vet Science, Myth Breakers. We've got a lot of classes.
Wow, that's pretty cool. So when the kids finish up with this, I guess this is something that will give them a foundation. Are there plenty of opportunities once they leave this summer after having learned a ton for them to continue those things that they've found interest in? Or is this just kind of an island out there right now in that regard?
That's a great question. The way I look at STEM is that it's, the STEM Institute is just one of several important options that need to be available to kids. If you look at our website, prestonmiddleschool.org, you'll see on the front page a model of a STEM school. So in order for a student to leave with the capability to succeed in a STEM career path beyond school, they need to have rigorous academics. They need to have an opportunity to pursue their passions. And some of that looks like some of the academic competitions like Math Counts, Lego Robotics, First Tech Challenge, First Robotics. There's Sea Perch Underwater Robotics, there's Science Bowl, Science Olympiad, Ocean Bowl. There's lots of ways kids can compete, and I believe that competition is an important part of this whole thing. So they can do that during the school year. Many schools, including ours, help connect kids into real service projects. We have a project called Engineering Brightness that actually Heidi's helping with. It's engineeringbrightness.org or philanthropicengineering.org, where they can actually either learn or take their learning and apply it to solving a world problem, and that is designing and producing lights that can be used in places on Earth that don't have safe, reliable light after dark. And that's about a seventh of the world's population. That's 1.7 billion people are affected by that. So our kids ought to be solving world problems as a part of their STEM interests. They need to learn how to collaborate, and most schools provide that. And I think they also need to do the discovery and exploration, which really is what the STEM Institute's about. So that's that component, but there are 4 other components that many schools offer just on an everyday basis. They may not realize how important what they're doing is.
So then are there relationships with colleges across the country as well, to where, Johnny decides that this is what he's passionate about and what he wants to do? Are there at least introductions that can be made, or at least guidance that can be given for these kids once they're out of high school to continue that education to be able to pursue whatever that interest is?
Well, I would say yes. There are lots of amazing schools, and there are schools that are responding to some of the major problems. Take Stanford, for instance. The fail rate in Calc 1 at Stanford, and this is a little dated, was 50 to 60% in Calc 1 at Stanford. So those are smart kids, and one of every two students were not making it through their first year of calculus. And if you don't make it through your first year of calculus, you're not going to make it through any more engineering classes, probably any more science classes. You got to get Calc 1. So universities are looking at their practices, and they formed organizations to help kids. Now, students of color were failing at a higher rate even than the general rule. And so they've developed a mentorship program at Stanford, and they've increased that pass rate, I think, by at least 25 or 30% in Calc 1. And so universities are taking responsibility for their students, and that's happening all over the country. I don't think anybody in the world can look down on STEM education at the secondary level, the post-secondary level in this country. There's some great schools out there. The India Institute of Technology is a great school, but we've got great schools in every one of the 50 states, and they're providing great opportunities for kids. My thing is, we need to kind of bring a system. We need to develop a system so that we're creating opportunities for all kids.
Awesome. John, is there anything else you'd like to share about the institutes or anything else you're up to in regards to STEM? It's been a blast talking to you, and I've learned a lot. To be honest, I've kind of been in the dark about a lot of this just because my kids are a bit older and we're kind of disjointed from all that. So anything else you'd like to share?
Well, American education is a big and complicated affair, because it's really the local communities that make the decisions. And I think if, as long as school boards and decision makers at the state level are looking at some of these issues, and they are, that things are going to get better. Texas is doing so many good things, exciting things. They've embraced First Lego League and First Tech Challenge. I've got some friends down that way in the Sweetwater area that have been real leaders, in creating these opportunities for kids. People get it, and I think it's a fire that's starting slowly, and I think it'll burn intensely as time goes on. The other thing is we'd love to get educators from other parts of the country to attend our STEM Educator Symposium, which we usually have in March and April each year here in Fort Collins. It's a deliberately small program, less than 60 participants. We get a lot of folks from Indiana, but we'd love to have some folks come out from your listening audience to the STEM Educator Symposium at stemsymposium.org. And each year we have a pretty good program.
So, John, what's the best way? You've given a number of resources and websites. What's the best way if people have questions or would like to begin a relationship for them to reach out to you?
They'd be welcome to contact me at JHOWE, J Howe, at PSD Schools, that's Papa Sierra Delta Schools.org.
Awesome. Well, John Howe, thank you very much for your time. And I know the School Zone podcast audience is going to be blessed by this talk. You have a great rest of the week.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, we would be honored if you would leave a 5-star rating and review and hit subscribe on your podcast player of choice.
Are you an educator, administrator, or school volunteer looking for a simpler way to raise money for your school? Let School Spirit Vending put their hassle-free year-round fundraising program to work for you. School Spirit Vending. We do all the work. You cash the check. Go to schoolspiritvending.com/schoolzone for all the details.